to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio live here on the Inception Radio Network. And so a couple of announcements starting in January 2013. Just Energy Radio is moving to Thursday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so mark that on your calendars. Our first show, we're going to be doing an astrological preview of the year ahead. We're having Michelle Levante and Deborah Clement, two of my favorite astrologers, looking at everything from financial things. I don't know everything, but they're very cool. They're very grounded and down to earth. Also next week, so that's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Next week, in case the world doesn't come to an end, we're going to be opening up the phone lines and finding out your stories of survival of December 21st, 2012. Where you were and where you think we're going in the future. We're opening up the phone lines. I'm going to be joined by a good friend, John Michael Greer. And we are just hoping to let our hair down and breathe for a while, and enjoy ourselves and enjoy our time. So please do check out the show and call in and share your stories. Let's see, what else? Please do check out the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com. You can check out our archives there, as well as sign up for our weekly newsletter. And, well, I think I'm going to stop with my little announcements right now, and we're going to get our next guest on the air. And so in this hour, we're going to be talking about free energy. And I like free things. And so free energy, especially with a $500 electric bill, is a good thing. And to do that, we're going to be talking with Jeane Manning. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeane, and we're going to get her on the air. Jeane Manning is an award-winning author whose nonfiction book takes you inside a dynamic international scene, a world of inventors, outside-the-box engineers, and heretical scientists whose accomplishments have long been mislabeled as impossible free energy. Their work instead is becoming recognized as new energy and is bringing very possible solutions to some of humankind's biggest problems. So her webpage is www.changingpower.net and www or books are breakthroughpower.net. Please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Jeane Manning. Hey, Jeane, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dr. Rita.
Hey, you talk about energy. I talk about energy. How cool is that?
Yes, and I'm really happy to talk with somebody who understands the background energy, the importance that everything's vibrating, and you know, the fact that there's a lot more going on than the official reality has been showing us or talking about publicly.
You know, and I think with what is going on, you know, politically and environmentally, and, you know, there's a whole long list of reasons, financially, you know, becoming up with some form of free energy or less polluting energy is a great thing. So I'm glad to have you on the show. But let's start here, you know, because you haven't been on before, and just share with listeners how you became interested in, you know, free energy yourself, you know, this whole area.
Well, it was a long stretch. My degree is in sociology, and you know, worked as a social worker and worked in newspaper editor, and so on. But in 1981, I met an inventor and his family. He thought that he had a magnetic generator that would really revolutionize everything. It turned out that he had made advances to the state of the art, but he didn't really have quite what he thought he did. But through them, I met a whole international network of people that have been ever since, long before then, making advances in understanding how to tap into the background energy of the universe. And for most of the past 30 years, it's just been shoved off into a corner as far as the official reality goes, and made the topic of ridicule. And I noticed that every few years, one of the major science magazines would run an article reminding people that if anybody makes any unusual claims, that they have to be ridiculed as perpetual motion inventors. But what these people that I was meeting are doing, they're not claiming to do so-called perpetual motion, which is defined as creating energy out of nothing. I mean, that's impossible. There really are laws of physics that say you can't create something out of nothing. But if you are doing things quite differently from the usual approach to electric generators, and you're able to tap into a previously unrecognized source of energy, which is around us and permeates everything. So you're not violating a law of conservation of energy, because you're just tapping into something that just hasn't been talked about in the textbooks that much. And actually, in various forms, this background energy in the universe is in science acknowledged, official science. Quantum physics, for instance, talks about the zero-point energy or the vacuum fluctuations of background space, or various terms. But they just talk about little tiny effects that go on the microscopic level, that you could use in the microelectronic equipment. And over in the engineering departments of the universities, they don't even hear about what the physicists are talking about in quantum physics. So they're not trying to engineer anything to tap into so-called zero-point energy, because they, aren't even having that discussion in most universities. Things are changing. But anyway, it was a long stretch, because I'm not trained in the hard sciences, and sociology is not exactly engineering and techie stuff. But I knew that as a journalist, I can tell people's stories, kind of be true to what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And at that time, I didn't know if they were just full of a lot of hope and it wasn't grounded in any reality. But I just found this a really fascinating field, because there was a lot of intrigue and people being threatened and really determination, really strong, kind of heroic people that carried on in spite of having their labs trashed or whatever was happening to them, and in spite of the ridicule that was placed on them whenever their topics were mentioned. And so I just thought, well, it's an interesting people scene, and I certainly am a people person. That's, sociology is all about, and my newspaper background, my writing skills. I'll just tell their story, and I'll, just let the rest of the world know that that's just really fascinating stuff going on. But over the years of going to about more than 24 conferences in several continents, international conferences, and also interviewing the scientists and engineers in their own homes and laboratories, and inventors in their own workshops, and transcribing the audio tapes of lectures and interviews. Enough of it sunk in that I was able to see that there are really credible people who are having positive results, who do have working prototypes that they're not ready for the marketplace yet, but they have proven the point. And so finally in 1996, Avery of New York published my first book, The Coming Energy Revolution. And I thought that was the end of it. I've written my little book. Now that's the end of it. But that was just the beginning, really, of a lot of people contacting me after that and saying, "Well, here's somebody who's really looked into this quite deeply and will give us a fair listen." And so, and the level of trust, a lot of people have told me what they're doing, and I will never reveal it to the end of my life if that's what is required. But just knowing what's going on, I just want to know the big picture of the possibilities for humankind.
I mean, one of the things I don't understand and still don't understand is how after the gas shortage in the 70s, why hasn't there been a more concerted effort into developing free or sustainable energy technology in the first place? It just seems like we got caught with our pants down, and then in recent years, they did it to us again.
I'd say two words: vested interests. It's really hard for me to get my mind around that people would care more about their stocks and their corporations and their sunk investments than the future of their children and grandchildren. But that's the reality. I know one physicist, Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, happened to be in the company of some high-level planners and even generals in the room. At one point, they were, consulting her expertise, and she said to them, "Gentlemen, don't you have grandchildren?" It's hard to believe, but I think there's more to it than just greed and suppression, and academics being unwilling to figure that they might have missed something. Once their careers are well established and they're being seen as the experts, it's hard to acknowledge that what they have been claiming is impossible is possible. I think it's bigger picture of the whole humankind had to learn some hard lessons spiritually before we're ready to take more responsibility, and I think that's happening now to the extent that it is coinciding with a lot more revelations, a lot more people ready to, they say they're almost ready to commercialize their inventions, and it's becoming, in some circles, respectable to go to these conferences now. Whereas before it was just considered fringe, and only the retired engineers that didn't have to jeopardize their careers by, or academics that would be subject to ridicule in the staff coffee room. They for a long while I would only mainly seen really young people and the retired people at these conferences. But there was a wonderful conference in Holland last month, and I see it as another sign that things are just really changing fast. It was organized by people who are really savvy with social media and with putting on a really professional event that is, not phony slick, but certainly the general public can understand what's going on. It wasn't a large attendance because this is just what they call the breakthrough energy movement is just gathering steam, but they're talking now about conferences in other countries. South Africa is probably going next in the spring, and somebody in the solar industry from Germany offered to help organize one in Berlin. We're just really coming into a new era with this really, really fast. The timing is really interesting. Like you mentioned, at the point where there's so many things converging politically and with the weather events and people's awareness and concern about how high prices of fuel and the economy. It's interesting that this is the time that a number of these inventions are approaching the marketplace.
Well, and, talking even a bigger picture, I think topics that have been on the fringe, ghost hunting, UFOs, anything that, if you mentioned it in mixed company, psychic phenomena, people would just look at you and, think, of course, in their head, you're going to be burning in hell kind of thing, where now people are more open to it, at least have heard of it. and maybe have a comment to make one way or the other. And so I feel like the whole free energy thing kind of fits into, in this bigger umbrella of moving from the shadows into the forefront.
Well, it certainly fits into if there's disclosure of extraterrestrial presence in craft. Well, then people would start asking, in larger numbers, that people would start asking, well, let's see, what powers those things? I don't see any gas cap on that UFO.
It's electric. No, that's why they're quiet. But let's shift our focus and talk about Nikola Tesla. Wasn't he considered kind of the grandfather of free energy? Oh, yes.
He's really a very extraordinary being. Just who knows what his soul history is. But he didn't care so much about starting a business. Or, Edison, in contrast, really had that angle figured out, and Tesla, of course, invented the basis for our electrical generating and distributing system that we use now, the AC alternating current system, and then he didn't just leave it at that. He kept on trying to understand the universe and how everything works, and that search took him way, way beyond this relatively coarse form of electricity that we use now. And he started dealing with something that he called radiant energy, which has different qualities than our the type of electricity that we use. And we don't talk in terms in our textbooks. We don't talk about quality of electricity. We just talk about quantity. But his radiant energy experiments show that we could have technologies that are not as harmful as the ones we have now. People who don't need to get electrocuted or be subjected to the 60 cycle, which is an unnatural rate of vibrations for our systems. And that would have made his whole discoveries, transmitting electricity wirelessly, with transmitters and receivers. It's not throwing standard electricity through the air. That doesn't work. But it's dealing with something different, and with principles of resonance. And so if his more advanced systems had been adopted, then the banksters like J.P. Morgan, who'd bought up all the copper mines by then for stringing high-tension power lines across the continents, they would have seen their investments in copper wire, not to mention the utility companies' monopolies on our energy use. They wouldn't have their fortunes made in that way, and so J.P. Morgan is said to have said, no way, nobody's going to have free energy. I want to just mention with that term free energy, I'm aware that to an engineer, it's like fingernails scratching on a blackboard. I mean, it's really an irritating phrase because their precise minds point out that it's not really free if you have to buy the equipment that converts the energy. So that phrase does carry some baggage of the past ridicule that this whole field has gotten. So some of the people in the field now are using other terms like breakthrough energy, breakthrough power, new energy. We have a new energy movement.
Well, there are people that say that our ancestors were tapping into energy similar to what Tesla was creating, with the pyramids, and actually this is a new little track I'm on, except I need like an electrical engineer to help me figure it out, because I'm like reading these articles going, okay, but I have zero idea what that means, although I have a thought. Because one of the things I figured out was that Tesla, you had to have the transmitter and then you had the receivers, and whether the pyramids were transmitters, and then some of these other sacred sites were receivers or amplifiers of the energy, because there seems to be a lot of evidence coming out that there are energy emissions from these sites that seem very similar to Tesla waves. I think that's the right name, Tesla waves. Tesla.
There's different terminology used for these things. Some called. Some are talking about.
So, in your research, have you run into anybody else making that parallel or comparison?
Well, I'm thinking of Dan Davidson's discussion of shape power, and pyramid shape is one that that creates an effect interacting with the ether, which is a broader term than 0-point energy. It's as you know, an ancient term for the background energy in the universe. But Dan Davidson did a lot of experiments with pyramids and other shapes, and he has a little book, Shape Power. He'd be an interesting guest for you. And I don't think anybody, because nobody is sanctioned by the official academic science in these matters. So nobody is saying that they have the last word on this, but the principles of resonance being used in these technologies, that seems to be pretty widespread in a lot of these devices, and of course it was part of Tesla's science, and any musician can understand what that means. If you strike a note on a musical instrument, then another instrument across the room tuned to the same note would vibrate too, and this is how energy can be amplified, and that's being used in electronic circuits, those principles of energy amplification. So you could start with a small input and have a large output, and that's okay. So free energy, often the devices do have some input, but it might just be microamperes, just a teeny trickle of electricity just to set things in motion. And I write about experimenters like the late Floyd Sweet, who worked for General Electric, and after he retired started experimenting. And he had a solid state, which means no moving parts, device, which electronically amplified with the help of magnetism, something like 1 million times more output than input. I mean, it was just incredible. He's one of the people who carried his secrets to his grave, unfortunately. Some of the problems in the field are due to human nature. People become bitter or paranoid when they're not given the sort of treatment that they think their discoveries deserve. And I have to sympathize with some of what they've been through. But yeah, I think that Tesla technology is just being unpacked. There are people like Peter Lindemann, who too would be a good guest for you, who've been working for years to understand what was actually going on with Tesla technology. And I know another man with a physics PhD, I believe, who just built everything exactly the way Tesla described it in his patents and writings. I mean, down to exact same formula for the wax and insulation and everything. And over years and years, has been able to crack the secrets of some of the radiant energy effects. And I saw a demonstration of what they call cold electricity. I mentioned that this radiant energy has different qualities, and cooling instead of heating. In standard electrical technologies, you put a load on a generator. Like you got a electrical generator, and you hook up some appliance or a heater or something to it to run the appliance. And if it's a big load, the generator will heat up. It'll heat up, anyway, according to how big the load is how much it heats up. Well, just the opposite happens in some of these experiments with this radiant energy, is that the more load they put on, the colder it gets. And, one...
Okay, that doesn't make sense, but...
No, but it's a different... you're working with something different. You're not working with standard electricity. And I've seen the demonstration where the same man that I mentioned that replicated Tesla experiments, and one of them, he put a light bulb that was lit by this other type of electricity, plunged it into a bowl of water, and random people from the audience were invited to come up and plunge their hands in the water. I mean, this is don't try this at home, folks. But nobody was electrocuted or even zapped at all. And it can run on, it only requires a thin wire to run the amount of electricity that would, judging by the halogen light or whatever is being lit, it would require a lot heavier wire with regular electricity, or else you'd have a fire running along the wire. It's really, really weird, Dr. Rita, that there's this whole emerging world of possibilities and things going on that have possibilities for a clean energy future, and in our official reality, they're just so ignored that it's like they don't exist. But that's not gonna last much longer.
Thank God. Thank God. So one of the things that you mentioned, and they're like blabbing about it sort of in the chat room, because I try not to read the chat room because you can just get absorbed in there, is 0 point energy. I mean, when we talk about 0 point energy, are we talking about like dark matter, or is this something else?
0 point energy may explain the so-called dark energy, but the narrow definition of 0 point energy is just the vibration, the jittering of molecules that goes on at absolute 0 degrees. So there's no thermal energy, there's no heat energy that's causing the motion, but there's always this background energy. And that's a pretty limited way of looking at it. I think that the people that are using this concept of the ether are probably going to be able to go farther, because their vision is broader of what can be, and some of the narrow definitions of 0 point energy, it looks to me like they're describing something that's just an effect of a greater cause. And so I use the analogy that you wouldn't say wind power is caused by the fluttering of leaves on a tree. It's actually the wind power itself is causing the fluttering, and so it's describing an effect. And saying that that's the power, but I'm not a physicist. I'm only somebody who has talked with dozens and dozens of engineers and scientists that are working in this field, and kind of putting it all together in my mind to kind of get a sense of which direction is probably going to be the most fruitful for actual giving us some replacements for the polluting energy technologies. I don't claim to be a scientist or an expert. I'm just trying to get the big picture.
Well, thank God.
because with my
I've had
background, I
physicists
care
on
about
the show, and I'm like
clean water and clean air.
So if you had to pick, of the multiple choices of free energy out there, technology that's being developed right now, which one do you think seems the most credible, and which one would you like to see, even if it's just theoretical, which one do you like personally the best?
Okay, that's two different things.
Well, I know, but
No, I'm going to give you two different answers because for the most credible, as science stands right now, at the current state of accepted physics, the field that started out being misnamed as cold fusion and was said to have been dead and buried, and is now goes by different names like low energy nuclear reactions. That's the field that is starting to get more mainstream notice, and including like the chief scientist at NASA, Langley, Dennis Bushnell, saying that's the direction that they're looking in, and there are products that are closer to commercialization in that field. Like there's one out in California, Brillion, that's BRILLOUIN, energy company, and they're working with Stanford Research Institute. They've had their version tested by enough other scientists that I think they've pretty well proved that they've really got something in there, and they claim that they understand the process more than their competitors in the field, and so they very likely will be kind of first in line for getting on the marketplace. But my favorite is really farther from acceptance. It's still way off in the farther off in the ridicule area, and that's the innovative use of magnetic magnetics. That's where I came in, and that's an area that can't be, most of the inventions, they can't be weaponized. So that's my criteria, and I really like the fact that backyard inventors and garage tinkerers could build that type of technology themselves, whereas it requires a bit more of a laboratory to work on the so-called cold fusion. And that's an area that I'll just call it cold fusion and stop saying so-called, but it's pretty well been proven to be neither fusion nor definitely not hot fusion. That was really said to be buried back in 1989, because the Department of Energy panel was really loaded with the hot fusion scientists, and they were quite happy to rush to judgment without really giving enough time for the experimenters to replicate it. That, to their credit, there wasn't an exact recipe put out. The two scientists, electrochemists Pons and Fleischmann, didn't really want to rush into an announcement of that technology, but their university pressured it into them because of competition. And it's still today, if you talk to the to most people who read science magazines and feel that they're pretty well educated in science, the term cold fusion is just a knee jerk that you laugh at it like the knee jerk laugh at UFOs. But the fact is that some really credible people around the world kept on with the experiments and found that yes, it was not as simple to repeat that experiment, but enough of them were getting excess heat out that they kept on, and they carried on their annual conferences, and the people who weren't doing the experiments that figured that they know everything dismissed them and laughed at them for continuing on, and they didn't get funding, but they knew that they were onto something, so they continued on. And now there are several, as I mentioned, people who and laboratories who are almost ready to have something on the market, and very respectable scientists like Dr. George Miley at University of Illinois have had the courage to just stand up and say what they see and continue working on it.
Do you think any of this stuff will ever hit the market? I mean, there's, there's
but
my
I'm
hope,
not sure exactly.
And then there's the reality of dealing with the electric companies and the gas and oil companies. I mean, do you think there's a chance? Somehow,
the human spirit will prevail. Somehow, these guys will find a way. Even if those who think that they can go straight into the usual route and get patents, which is not allowed. These categories of inventions are not given patents. The U.S. Patent Office has stated which categories will not be given patents. So even if the standard business model doesn't get them to the marketplace, there are other ways they can start. I think they'd be wisest, and some of them are talking about just starting in a niche market where they're not really going head on against the automobile industry. Go for a market that's remote power applications, or get it out to the people in some sort of a networking, like network marketing, but with only trusted associates. If it gets out in enough real working, say, you can drive a car across the country with this sort of product, or heat your whole neighborhood with this type of heater. If it's out there in enough places, then it can't be stopped. And there is the push in the new energy movement and the breakthrough energy movement to encourage inventors to open source their knowledge. It's just like software is open sourced. And even if they want to keep maybe their latest advance proprietary, just open source something so that others
can
experiment.
Get out there. Well, a number of years ago, there was a solar panel company, and I'm trying to think how many years ago, 6, 7, 8, a number of years ago. And they were in the development phase, but they were set up themselves up as kind of a multi-level marketing kind of company. And their whole thing was that, where they made their money, and I thought this was kind of a fair deal, was that there was a nominal buy-in fee, and, and they would come and install the thing on your roof, and you would pay them a monthly fee, but a big part of that was for them to maintain it. And so you got the ability to use the electricity. You could send some back to the grid. Now, they kept the money of what got sent back to the grid, but that was okay because I mean, I live in a small house, and this summer, well, pretty much every summer, my electric bill is like $500, which is, and my husband and I have like air conditioner wars all the time, and it would be nice to not have that $500 bill. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Yeah. And you probably care about breathing clean air, too.
Well, yeah, there's that part, too.
There is that.
But I think if they took a model kind of like that, where they're making it where you can get the technology, you can get the savings, but they're getting some kind of kickback. I mean, I guess that was my point is I didn't have an issue with them getting some kind of a kickback if they were providing me with something that was sustainable, that wasn't polluting, that was giving me other kinds of benefits, and they were the ones that were just managing it. It's like, we have to pay for management stuff. I can deal with that. Wasn't nearly as much as I was paying the electric company, though.
Exactly. I think that's a great model, because even a neighborhood-sized new energy generator, there has to be some techie around to make sure that everything's working properly.
Well, I mean, would it be that big? You don't think that the stuff they're coming out with would be something that if I wanted to put, I mean, all I can really relate to is solar panels. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good,
but if I put
model.
a solar panel on my house, I'm taking care of my little piece. And so, I don't have to worry about what my neighbor wants to do. But some of the stuff that they're developing, there would have to be some kind of buy-in from the community in order to utilize the technology.
No, not necessarily. It's just that some of these inventions are really scalable, so they could be powering a little separate chip or something in each appliance. Not a smart meter spy chip, but a useful chip in every appliance, or they can be scaled up to insert into an existing power plant and replace the burning of fuels to the energy inventions that create heat as a byproduct could be. But that's such that steam and turbines and everything is such a primitive technology compared to what we could have. And you mentioned solar panels. I certainly include all the standard clean energy alternatives in the possibilities for breakthroughs, because there have been a number of breakthroughs in the knowledge about solar photovoltaics that if they were developed, if there was a political will to make sure that these things are really developed fast and brought down in price, they could be doing the job. It doesn't have to be the exotic energy technologies. I just want to replace the abuses to planet Earth and to our health and to economies that are going on right now.
Well, and that's the part that kills me with the whole solar industry. There was such a boom on it, and they were making cars with solar panels, and there was, all of this stuff that I figured by the time I was at this point in my life that it would be standard fare for every home that was put in anywhere. And it's not. I mean, I just find it kind of remarkable. But let me ask this question.
I figure that too. The first energy conference that I went to as a reporter in the 80s was 1980s was a solar conference, and I was just really amazed that they were a lot had a lot more good technology than we ever heard about in the usual reports about what energy technology is available. But there's also a bit of vested interest entering into their scene too. I remember somebody put out a book, Who Owns the Sun? I think had some good stories about what they ran into. And the late Christopher Bird, the author, told me a story about a solar company that he knew about, and he was close friends with the chief scientist there. We told him that before the solar company was bought out by a big oil company, if you look on a graph, the improvements to the efficiency of their solar cells just was, heading upward at a good rate of incline. And after they were bought out, and they've been going for a few years under new management, it just kind of leveled out. And from the inside, the scientists said that the reason was that when somebody had a really good idea that could be, or potentially could be a real breakthrough, not just an incremental improvement to what they were doing, they didn't get funding for pursuing that idea. But if somebody came along with a mediocre idea, they got the funding. So he was pretty jaded about that sort of thing. There's,
and that's
a lot
just
of money
really
tied up,
shocking
multi-trillion-dollar world energy industry. And as long as the attitudes of what all that counts is stockholders and bottom line profits, then decisions have been made that didn't allow for really revolutionary breakthroughs. They just allowed for a little bit better than what we have. And then the same with the government funding for energy research. Even with the new announcements in a few years, 3 or 4 years ago, there was this new energy research agency created, and they were supposed to be funding breakthroughs, but none of these scientists who have, and these are scientists with really strong academic credentials that say that they put in proposals for the revolutionary energy technologies, and none of them got funding.
But it seems like, they, quote unquote, have a vested interest in not having it come to fruition. I mean, it just seems like, an oil company buying up a solar company. It's like, so you can say that we're working on developing solar technology just to make it sound good into your, marketing base, or to your, the people that have invested in your company because you're expanding your horizons. I mean, it just seems like some BS to me.
It is. And you look at their ads, their big 2-page advertisements for, BP is a clean energy company, or this crap, Yeah.
Well, I mean, that whole thing is just horrid. There's that whole big spill, and what came out of it? Nothing. No,
business as usual. But anyway, I do have a lot of hope, not just because tend to be an optimistic person, but because there is real solid proof that it is possible to have radically different clean energy technologies from what we have.
So is there anything that we can do to support the development of free energy technology?
The more that we learn about the other possibilities, the better. Is because there's not just the couple of different variations I've just been talking about here, the magnetics and the low energy nuclear reactions. There's a whole rainbow of possibilities that we write about in these books, like the Infinite Energy Technologies and our book Breakthrough Power. Because it's lack of public awareness that's kind of just kept these people feeling isolated, and they don't have a political lobby going for them. They don't really, and they don't have the power of positive thinking that could be going on. Right now I don't know if you believe that it's possible that our thoughts can affect the reality that we create. But right now, the reality that people are picturing in great quantities and with great emotion, great quantities of people, is almost a Mad Max future,
I know.
Peak oil,
what's with that?
Peak oil,
it used to be
downhill.
like Star Trek, and everybody got along, and you didn't need money. And now everybody's standing around a 50-gallon drum with a fire in the middle, and their little finger cut off gloves. And I'm like, that's not the future I want. Thank you.
And that's not. And we don't have to have that future. If we put the same professionalism of Hollywood productions and everything, and Hollywood millions of dollars into producing visions of what could be, something if you think of if there were some really advanced civilization out there on some other planet, what would their buildings look like? What would their landscape look like? It wouldn't be strewn with high tension power lines, which is primitive technology. You'd be able to breathe clean air on their main thoroughfares. You just let's put some visioning power into what would it be like to have a clean energy future, to have abundance of low cost, non-polluting energy, so you can have more leisure time because you don't have to spend so much time earning money to pay your power bills, and things will be less costly because there's not so much energy going into the manufacturing, and materials can be recycled because some of the materials that we can't recycle these days because it's so energy intensive, do that. New materials are possible. This is a byproduct of some of these technologies like Randall Mills at Blacklight Power coming up with new materials. And so you could have translucent buildings that are strong, and you don't have to have big air conditioner on the roof, and transportation can be revolutionized. With more leisure time, the arts can flourish. We don't have to fight oil wars. We can have an entirely different society. We don't have a world society based on fear of not controlling somebody else's resources that they have underneath their sand. And we don't have to, we don't have to think scarcity. We will still have to be responsible stewards of our planet, but we can clean up our waterways with some of the new energy technologies. They can take polluted water and take the pollution out at the same time as you're getting electricity from that process. The possibilities are really quite beautiful. And I don't underestimate what a transition time would entail. There would certainly be dislocation. It would certainly be a lot easier if we had, if it had been allowed back in 1980 when I was first meeting zero-point energy technology inventors. But it has to come sometime, so the sooner the better.
Well, and on that note, Jeane, I know the music is going to come up because they keep sending me little posts, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. So thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about free energy, because I think it's something that needs to be put out there and raise people's awareness to that it is there and available or going to be available, and to keep their eye out for possible things they can do or buy or participate in to make that be our future and not just a dream.
Thank you, Dr. Rita.
All right. Thank you, Jeane. That's Jeane Manning. She's a part author of the book Infinite Energy Technology, and her webpage is changingpoint.net. Changingpower.net, if I could read my own handwriting. But then next week, just in case the world doesn't come to an end, we'll be here on air. It'll be me and John Michael Greer talking about what were you doing while the world was coming to the end. We're opening up the phone line, so please do come in and share your stories of survival. So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. I hope we all make it till then. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.